Hi there. It's August the 18th, and today in our voyage through scriptures we begin a new book, which is the book of Esther. Esther in Hebrew is called Megillat Esther, that means the scroll of Esther. And often in the Jewish understanding, the scroll of Esther is a single scroll which is highly decorated and which is used for the Jewish festival of Purim, which means lots, which will become clear from the story that we're reading. And this festival involves the reading of the scroll of Esther, Megillat Esther, every year. Now, the story of Esther begins in the reign of King Xerxes I, a great king of the Persians, and he is one who is in the book called Ahasuerus. That's the Jewish name given to him, or the Hebrew version of his name. And he reigned in the time of the exile of the people of Israel in Babylon. And he is reigning before then the time of the last books that we read, Ezra and Nehemiah. He is just before the time of the return of the exiles to Jerusalem. And when the book opens, this King Ahasuerus is displaying the wealth of his kingdom, the wealth of his empire, to visiting royalty and to visiting nobles. And in this process, he puts on a tremendous feast, and the feast lasts for a week. And at the end of a week, he actually decides to call for his queen, Vashti. He calls for Queen Vashti, but Vashti refuses to come. She sticks her heels in and says, "I'm not going to be made a beauty queen for your sake." And this throws everyone into confusion because she's refused to obey her husband, the king. And so the king's advisors, and particularly one called Memucan, comes up with the idea that Vashti should be removed from being queen, and that another queen should be found, and that there should be news going throughout the empire that this is not the way that a queen should behave, and it's not the way that wives should behave towards their husbands. And so they send out a declaration throughout the empire, and Queen Vashti is removed from her position as queen. Now, in chapter 2, we find that Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, is looking for another queen. And he does it by basically getting applicants, and draws in young women from all over the empire. And in particular, here we are brought to the story of this young woman by the name of Esther. Now, Esther is probably her Persian name. Ishtar was actually one of the Persian deities, Persian goddesses, Astarte or Ishtar, meaning the star goddess. But her Hebrew name was Hadassah, and Hadassah means myrtle tree. So she had a Jewish name and she had a Persian name, and we're given both her names. But Hadassah is actually an orphan, we find, and she is taken in, and by the way, her father's name is Avichail. And Avichail and her mother are both off the scene, and so she is taken in by her cousin, who is called Mordechai. And Mordechai may also be his Babylonian name, because it has to do with the Babylonian god Marduk. But Mordechai is of the tribe of Benjamin, and he's been taken into exile with the other Jews and is living there. But he's got very well on in the royal civil service in Babylon, and he has quite a high position. And probably he also has to do with her bringing forward Esther into the purview of the king. And so after much beauty treatment, after much preparation, after a year of getting ready with various oils and beauty preparations, Esther is brought before the king, and Xerxes likes her and thinks she's beautiful, and so she is the one who is chosen to be the new consort of the king. At the end of chapter 2, we have this story about the uncovering of a murder plot against King Xerxes. Two of his officials plan to assassinate him. Mordechai hears about this, and through Esther he feeds back to King Xerxes information about this attempt, and because of this the offenders are captured and the king's life is spared, but also because of this Mordechai receives favour from the king. Now, moving on to chapter 3, the next part of the story introduces us to the villain of the piece. And certainly in the Festival of Purim and in the reading of the Megillat Esther, in the reading of the Scroll of Esther, the name of Haman is always greeted with boos and noise and rattles, rather like a pantomime villain would be here in our culture, in our tradition. And Haman is an Agagite. Haman is someone who is already high up in the king's estimation. He's probably the vizier, but he receives even more promotion. And in receiving promotion, it is expected that people will bow down and worship him. They will bow down and honor him. Now, here's something interesting about the book of Esther. Esther doesn't actually mention the name of God. It doesn't mention even anything about faith. But here's one thing that is a giveaway. As a Jew, it says, Mordecai will not bow down and worship or honor Haman. And Haman is really incensed by this. And he questions, or he's so angry about this, and this attitude of Mordecai towards Haman when he passes by, because he's a Jew, because he won't bow down and worship others, because he will only worship the one true God, Haman decides to take revenge on him, not just on him, but on all his people. And here is really the first time where a planned genocide against God's people is organized. And Haman goes to King Xerxes, and he gets the king to agree to wipe out the Jews, because he says that the Jews are a troublesome people who are undermining King Xerxes' rule, and he actually gets the king's seal, and so Haman writes letters that go throughout the empire. The day that they choose is the 13th day of Adar, the month of Adar, which is the last month in the Jewish calendar, which is around about February time. It changes sometimes with the coinciding of the solar and the lunar calendar, but it's mostly around the time of February. And in the month of Adar, this is the day that's chosen by lot that the people of Israel will be destroyed, that these exiles will be destroyed. And so here is the scene set for the attack, and also the scene set for the possibility of salvation, which is going to come, in which Esther is going to play a role. We always see how God's hand moves in history. God is not a God who is far away. God is not a God who is removed from us. He's a God who walks through the story with us, particularly with his people here. Because Mordecai is faithful to God, he will not bow down and worship men or gods, then he's challenged, his people are challenged, but we're going to see God come in rescue. God always steps in to rescue his people who are faithful to him. Let's keep faithful ourselves to him today and always. Have a very good August the 18th.